Welcome to Dataverse by NeenOpal, everyone. This is episode 23. And today we are taking a deep dive into something that honestly keeps a lot of operations managers up at night.
Oh, absolutely.
We are talking about data governance in the data deluge. And I love the analogy from the sources we're looking at today. Everyone says data is the new oil, right?
You hear that everywhere.
But unrefined oil is just toxic sludge. It's messy. And right now, companies are just getting completely overwhelmed by this unrefined deluge of information. It hinders decisions. It exposes companies to massive risks.
Yeah, we've treated data like it's just a sheer volume game for the past decade.
Yeah.
Just grab everything, store it somewhere, and we'll figure it out later.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how a robust data governance framework isn't just, an IT problem. It's the actual backbone for surviving in this digital landscape.
Because without it, all that collected data just decays. I mean, governance is the only way to ensure the integrity, the security, and the accessibility of your information. It makes data a trustworthy asset. And maybe more importantly for the C-suite, it keeps the company out of regulatory hot water. Because nobody wants to be on the wrong end of a GDPR or IPA or CCPA fine.
No, definitely not. Nobody wants to be the cautionary tale on the front page of the Wall Street Journal.
Exactly.
But to actually tame this deluge, the sources make it clear that we first have to figure out who is actually holding the buckets. So before we even touch the technical tools, we need to talk about the human element.
Which is where it always starts. If you don't have clear human accountability, the best software in the world won't save you.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the text lists a whole cast of characters. It's extensive. You have the steering committee. They're providing the high-level strategic oversight.
Right, the big picture, folks.
Then you have the data owners who enforce policies for specific data sets. And right below them, the data stewards. They're like in the trenches doing the day-to-day quality control.
Yeah, they're the unsung heroes, honestly.
Absolutely. Plus, you've got IT teams building the pipes, business stakeholders demanding the reports, compliance officers auditing the whole thing. I mean, looking at this list, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
Doesn't assigning all these highly specific roles just create massive corporate bureaucracy instead of agility? Like, businesses want to move fast.
That is the #1 pushback you hear. People hear governance council, and they immediately just picture endless meetings and red tape.
Right, like, great, another committee.
Exactly. But you have to think about corporate psychology. If you just broadly declare that data quality is everyone's job,
Then it's nobody's job.
precisely, it instantly becomes no one's responsibility. Marketing blames IT, IT blames sales, and that ambiguity is what actually slows a company down, which is why the sources lean so heavily on the RACI model.
The RACI model, RACI, that's responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, right?
You got it.
But, okay, let's say I'm put in the consulted group for a new data pipeline. Doesn't that just give me the power to stall a project forever by demanding more and more review cycles? How does RACI actually force a decision?
Because it separates the people giving input from the one person whose neck is on the line. So the responsible folks, like your data stewards, they do the actual work. They clean the data.
Okay.
The consulted group, maybe that's IT security, they provide parameters. But the accountable person, let's say the chief data officer, they hold the ultimate veto.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so if security is dragging their feet, the accountable executive has the defined authority to just say, we accept this risk, we are moving forward. RACI actually eliminates confusion and endless meetings because everyone knows who pulls the trigger.
That makes total sense. It prevents fragmented data because you always know who the buck stops with.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have our team assembled. They know their roles, but now they need a playbook, which brings us to the blueprints or the frameworks for order.
Right, because once you know who is driving, you need to agree on the traffic laws.
And the text outlines 4 established frameworks. You've got the DGI, the Data Governance Institute framework, the DAMA DMBOK, which is a mouthful, the McKinsey framework, and the maturity model.
It's quite the menu to choose from.
It is. How do you even begin to choose? Let's break down the strategic differences.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really depends on your organization's daily reality. Take the DGI framework. It is all about strict compliance and top-down control.
So heavy governance.
Very heavy. If you want to use a new data set, you draft a proposal, you go to the council, you wait for approval. It's slow, but it's incredibly secure. It's perfect for building from scratch in, say, a highly complex international bank.
So DGI is like building a custom, highly secure fortress.
Yes, exactly. Every brick is inspected. Now, compare that to DAMA DMBOK, which stands for Data management body of knowledge, by the way. That one is more for mature setups. It covers 11 different knowledge areas. It gives you a holistic view. So if DGI is building the fortress, DAMA is like doing a massive renovation on a giant estate to make sure the plumbing and electrical finally talk to each other.
Okay, so DAMA is for when you already have a structure, but it needs unifying. What about McKinsey?
The McKinsey framework is designed for flexible, rapidly scaling businesses. It's modular. You might have a central baseline for quality, but individual departments can operate self-service data portals.
Oh, so they don't have to ask permission for every little thing.
Exactly. It lets a fast-growing startup keep its agility while still having guardrails.
Like designing a modular office that can keep expanding without collapsing, that leaves the maturity model.
Right. And the maturity model is really an incremental roadmap. It categorizes your company from stage 1, which is just total chaos, all the way up to an optimized state.
It's a GPS tracker.
Exactly. It tells a company, you are here. Focus on these 3 steps to get to the next level. It stops teams from getting paralyzed by trying to do everything at once.
Which is so easy to do in this space. So we've got the team, we've chosen our playbook, but what are the actual daily practices? What are the nuts and bolts these teams are implementing?
This is where we get into metadata management.
Ah, metadata. The digital Dewey Decimal System.
It really is. It's data about your data, and it is the absolute foundation for content discoverability.
Right, because if marketing calls a record a client and finance calls it an account, the whole system breaks down. They need to standardize formats and naming conventions.
They have to speak the same language.
And the sources talk about using master data management or MDM tools like AWS Glue or Azure Purview to basically force a single source of truth across the company.
Yes. And if you look at the NeenOpal case study from the sources, it perfectly illustrates this.
Oh, yeah, the discoverability issue they had?
Exactly.
Right.
NeenOpal enhanced their metadata checks by implementing what we call logical validation layers. So they didn't just ask employees nicely to use the right tags.
They enforced it.
Right. They put a validation layer across their systems to ensure consistent metadata. So if a file doesn't have the standardized tags, it just gets rejected.
Right.
It completely revolutionized their content discoverability.
It's like a bouncer at a club checking IDs. If your data doesn't have the right metadata name tag, you aren't getting in.
Exactly. But once it is in, you have to manage its lifespan. And that brings us to lifecycle management.
Okay, here's where I want to challenge this a bit, because the text goes deep into data disposal policies, right? Secure, decommissioning, archiving.
It does.
But storage is practically free now. Cloud storage is so cheap. Why go through the administrative nightmare of constantly deleting things? Why not just keep everything forever, just in case an AI model needs it in 5 years?
A lot of companies think that way, and it's a massive trap. First of all, compliance and privacy. You legally cannot hoard sensitive customer data indefinitely just because you want to.
Ah, right. The data privacy laws.
Yeah, if you suffer a breach and lose data that you legally should have deleted 5 years ago, the fines will be astronomical. But the second reason is efficiency.
Meaning what, exactly?
If you keep petabytes of useless, decaying data in your active systems, your analytics engines have to churn through all that garbage every time you run a query.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it slows everything down, and your computing costs, the processing power, not the storage, will absolutely skyrocket.
So it's not the hard drive space, it's the brain power required to search the hard drive.
Exactly. Which is why modern lifecycle management uses tools like AWS S3 Glacier or Azure Blob for secure storage, and even AI frameworks like TensorFlow to monitor usage.
So it's automated.
Completely scalable.
Yeah.
If a dataset isn't touched for 90 days, the system automatically moves it to cheaper, colder storage. And when it hits the end of its legal retention, it's securely deleted.
The system cleans its own room. I love that.
Yeah.
But even with perfect metadata and life cycles, data is constantly changing. We're keeping track of the chaos.
He's a living, breathing thing.
Yeah. Exactly. And the text brought up this terrifying example about version control and logging practices. There was a customer database, right?
Yes, the untracked schema changes.
Right. The engineering teams were just making changes to the schema, the underlying skeleton of the database, without tracking it, like adding a column for middle name on a Tuesday.
And what's fascinating here is how quickly that breaks the enterprise. Because the downstream reporting tools didn't expect a middle name column.
They just threw errors and crashed.
Exactly. The dashboards went totally dark.
So how did they fix it?
They implemented metadata versioning using tools like Apache Atlas or AWS Glue Schema Registry. It basically maintains a clear history of all structural changes.
Oh, so it intercepts the change before it happens. It says, hey, if you add this column, you're going to break the dashboard.
Exactly. It gives teams the chance to adapt before deployment. But tracking structure is only half the battle. You also have to track human behavior, which means centralized logging.
The sources mention access logs, change logs, error logs, and audit logs. But honestly, if you have 10,000 employees clicking around all day, doesn't logging everything just create a second, even worse data deluge?
It absolutely can.
Yeah.
Log overload is a real problem. The storage costs alone can be staggering.
So what's the mitigation?
Granular logging. You don't log every single mouse click. You log what carries risk.
Yeah.
Specifically, access to PII, personally identifiable information.
All right, the sensitive stuff.
You also use log rotation and compression. Keep the high-fidelity logs active for 30 days, then compress them. But the real key is feeding those logs into centralized tools like AWS CloudWatch or Azure Monitor.
To create a single source of truth for compliance audits.
Exactly. You set operational thresholds. So CloudWatch acts like a motion sensor camera in a hallway. It ignores the background noise, but if someone tries to download the entire HR payroll at 3 a.m., it triggers an alarm.
I really like that analogy. You only review the tape when the alarm trips. Okay, so to prove these concepts aren't just, theoretical, let's look at some real-world wins and cautionary tales from the text, starting with the factory scenario.
Ah, the inventory nightmare.
Right. There's a company tracking inventory by weight in one factory and by unit quantity in another, so truck pulls up expecting 2 tons of material, but only finds 2 individual units.
And the supply chain just grinds to a halt.
Exactly. But they solved it by adopting centralized data management. The sources specifically mention Snowflake and Apache Kafka.
Yes. Kafka acts as the central nervous system, streaming events in real time, and Snowflake acts as the central warehouse. Because they implemented governance across those tools, it eliminated the weight versus quantity confusion entirely.
And we saw a similar win with the retail chain. They had inconsistent product codes across regions, which severely hindered their enterprise reporting.
You can't mathematically calculate your best sellers if the regional tables won't merge.
Right. But by establishing enterprise-wide guidelines and having data stewards enforce those product codes, they fixed the reporting.
It's powerful when it works. But the sources also give us some severe cautionary tales to drive the point home.
Like the tech company that got slapped with a massive fine.
Yes. A major tech company fined purely for a lack of transparency and consent regarding user data. It's a massive compliance risk. If you don't govern how data is collected and tracked, the regulators will find out.
And the fines are not cheap.
Not at all. And then there's the media company example. They actually survived a catastrophic cloud outage because they had a multi-cloud exit strategy baked into their governance.
Oh, wow. So they weren't locked into just one vendor.
Exactly. Vendor dependency is a huge vulnerability. Their governance framework ensured their data could seamlessly pivot to another provider when the primary one went down.
That is smart planning. But none of this, the frameworks, the tools, the multi-cloud strategies, none of it works without the final piece. Training.
Continuous training is non-negotiable.
The sources are very adamant about this. You need role-based and cross-functional training on these tools, whether it's AWS or Azure.
Right, because a marketing director needs to know how to interpret the dashboard, but a data engineer needs to know how to configure the schema registry.
And you have to measure that training, right? The text mentions tracking metrics like actual error reduction. If your schema errors aren't going down, your training isn't working.
Exactly. You have to quantify the success of your governance program.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Let's bring it all together. Navigating the data deluge requires abandoning the idea that just hoarding data creates value.
It definitely doesn't.
You need a structured framework, whether that's DGI or McKinsey.
Yeah.
You need defined RCI roles so people know who is accountable. And you need modern tracking tools, metadata management, automated life cycles, and centralized logging to turn all that raw data into a trustworthy strategic advantage.
Because the reality of digital transformation is that it hinges entirely on well-governed data. If you buy the most expensive analytics AI on the market, but you feed it fractured, ungoverned data, you are literally just throwing money down the drain. You're just making bad decisions faster.
Well said. And on that note about AI, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. There was a brief mention in the text about an AI recruitment platform that improved its fairness by using governance to detect bias and validate its inputs.
A really fascinating use case.
It is, because as AI systems become more advanced, they learn entirely from our historical data. So think about this. If our data governance is the parent, teaching the AI child how to view the world, what hidden biases are currently sitting in your organization's ungoverned data archives, quietly waiting to shape your future AI's decisions?
That is a terrifying but very necessary question to ask.
It really is something to mull over as you look at your own company's spreadsheets this week. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We will see you on the next one.